Hi everyone, thank you for coming tonight and welcome to the book launch event for Laurie Morrison's coming up short. She is here tonight in conversation with Cordelia Jensen, and their collab book, Every Shiny Thing, is here as well. So Laurie's going to do a little reading, and then they're going to talk a while, and then we can take questions from the audience. I hope you enjoy. Books will be for sale and signable afterwards. All right.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you for being here. Thank you for recording. So I will read a little bit from chapter 1 of Coming Up Short. I pound my fist into the worn pocket of my glove and crouch into fielding position. This, right now, is what I live for. It's the softball league semifinals, and we're up 5-4 with 1 out in the last inning. The other team center fielder just slapped a perfect bunt on the third base line, so she's the tying run, standing on first base and ready to take off. But there's no way she's crossing home plate. There's no way we're giving up this lead. 1 down, Falcons, I shout. Place to first or second. The cack cheer starts up on our bench and spreads through the bleachers. Cack, cack. Faster and faster, louder and louder, with more and more people joining in. That's the sound actual falcons make when they're protecting their nests. So it's a Butler Middle School thing to yell cack when their teams are protecting a lead. I've never heard the chant get anywhere near this loud at a softball game though, and I freaking love it. Adrenaline courses through my body. All these people are watching us. Parents, teachers, the whole baseball team. Even Tyson Carter, who hates me because I got him in trouble for not doing any work on our science project, and his friends who groan when I talk too much in class. They're all here, cheering for my teammates and me. I glance at Amelia, who's playing second base, and wiggle 2 fingers in the air. She nods and flashes 2 fingers back. A double play ends the game right here. If there's any way Amelia and I can turn 2, we will. Let's go, Falcons, Coach Yang yells. Stay focused now, play smart. The other team's batter gets into her stance, bending her knees and wiggling the bat over her back shoulder. Right here, I will her. Hit the ball to me. There are 2 kinds of fielders. That's what Dad says. The ones who want to make the play with the game on the line, and the ones who hope the ball goes somewhere else because they're scared of messing up. I never play scared. I always want to make the play. Our pitcher, Monique, whips the ball over the inside corner of the plate, jamming the batter. The ball pops off the skinny part of the bat and bounces past Monique's outstretched glove toward me. Yes, I charge. First, Coach yells. That's the safe play, tossing the ball to first base to get 1 out. But the other team's best hitter is in the on-deck circle, up next, and Amelia's ready at second base. I pull my arm back and throw as hard as I can. Smack! The ball hits the webbing of Amelia's glove and beats the lead runner by a full step. Amelia pivots and launches the ball to first base just in time. Out! The umpire shouts, pointing to second base and then to first, and I leap into the air and scream my lungs out. Yes! Amelia runs over to do our double play handshake, bumping shoulders and then hips and slapping our gloves together. You've got guts, B, she yells over all the noise. I can't believe you threw to second on a dribbler. It wasn't a dribbler, I protest, even though it kind of was. Amelia whacks my arm with the outside of her glove. It was definitely a dribbler. Not that I'm complaining. Behind home plate, Coach Yang is talking to the umpire. Try to turn 2 if the ball is hit hard, go straight to first if it's not. That's her rule, and I broke it. But Dad's the one whose voice I hear in my head when I play softball, and Dad's rule is to trust your gut and never second guess yourself. That's when errors happen, when you let doubt in. I believed I could make that throw, and I did. My best friend Jessie sprints in from center field. That was clutch, Beezy, she yells. We're going to the finals. On the sideline, everyone is chanting, Falcons, Falcons. Xander Berg Thomas is there in the front. I spotted him during warm-ups because I basically have Xander radar, so I always spot him. I didn't let myself look back at him the whole game so I wouldn't lose my focus, but I look now and my already full heart swells. The rest of our teammates pile on top of Amelia, Jessie, and me. I end up at the bottom of a mass of sweaty softball players and somebody spikes my toe, but I don't even care. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Great game, Falcons, Coach Yang calls. Let's line up and show our opponents some respect. The other team's waiting, tears streaming down their faces because their season is over. We head over to tell them all good game, and then I scan the crowd for my parents, but I don't see them. They were here in the bottom of the 5th inning. I saw them cheering after I scored a run, but now I see everybody else's families except mine, which makes 0 sense. My parents wouldn't miss this for the world, literally. There's a hand on my shoulder, Coach Yang leading me away from the rest of my team. That was a risky play, B. And okay, there. I see Mom's reddish-brown hair and big sunglasses, and Dad's red Falcons hat, white shirt, and softball tie. They're standing way far away, closer to the other team's fans than ours. They folded up their chairs and packed up all their stuff as if they're in a hurry to take off, which is bizarre, but they're here, waving at me. Dad pulls on his earlobe 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I love you. I do it back fast and then focus on Coach. I need you to play smart, she's telling me. And I'll stop there.
So before I go into my questions, maybe you could just briefly say what the book is about.
Sure, yeah. So Coming Up Short is about a 13-year-old girl named B who is a star shortstop who loves softball more than anything else in the world. But after her dad makes a big mistake that costs him his job and his reputation, she can't think straight on or off the field. And she makes error after error in the championship game and then escapes to a place called Gray Island, where she gets to attend a special softball camp with her idol and is determined to beat the yips and get back to her confident and in control self. But that's not quite as simple as it seems.
Okay, so we just heard a lot of softball.
Lots of softball.
And I know you played some softball.
I did.
So did you have to do any research on softball, or did it all come back to you like when you were writing those scenes?
It all came back to me. I played softball not as seriously as B, but I did play softball in middle school and high school, and then I continued to play just for fun, like at an intramural level, and then just for fun, even as like in my 20s. So it was pretty fresh in my mind, but I did have one of my former students from when I taught middle school who was a more serious softball player. I had her do an expert read. So when the book was close to done, she read it for me just to see if there were any things, like either things that changed or things that just maybe I didn't remember as well. So she had a few suggestions that I did incorporate in. But for the most part, I didn't have to do much research. Unlike for Up for Air, because I was not really a serious swimmer. I mean, I know how to swim, I can swim laps, but I never swam competitively. And Laura, who's in the audience, was a help with that book. And some of my former students also did an expert read for that. But I did kind of have to look up for would you get disqualified if? Like that kind of question, and I didn't have to do any kind of research like that for softball. I knew it well enough.
So Up for Air and Coming Up Short share a setting.
They do.
I mean, Coming Up Short has 2 settings. It starts in New Jersey and moves to Gray Island.
Yeah.
And Up for Air just is in Gray Island. And so I was wondering, when you went back a couple years later to write a book in that setting, if you uncovered new things about the setting, did you surprise yourself, or did you remember everything about it? Did you have to go back and fact check?
I definitely had to go back and fact check. So late in the revision process, there were things like I had mentioned a bagel place in both books, and I had to make sure that I'd given it the same name. And it turned out that up until very late in the game for Coming Up Short, I thought I had the shirts that the employees wear at the ice cream store. It was like, are they maroon or are they dark green? They're one or the other. I got to go back and check. So I did have to check stuff like that. But my initial vision for Gray Island was more like what happens in Coming Up Short. The first time I wrote about that setting was in a book that never sold, that was never published, but where a girl went there to stay with an estranged family member, which is sort of what happens in this book, although it's a different family member and it's a totally different story. But I had originally written about that island setting as like an outsider vacationing there, but then I spun off and used a secondary character from that book, Annabelle, as the star of Up for Air, who lives on the island year round. And so then for B in Coming Up Short, she is going there on vacation. So it's very different she's seeing everything for the first time. So she definitely notices different things. And I think it was easier, to work in some of the like beach and ocean setting details in this book, because it just felt more logical to me that this person who had not been there before would be noticing all that stuff.
So she kind of becomes an ocean girl while she's there.
She does, yeah.
So you mentioned who she lives with, which is the great Aunt Mary. For those of you who haven't read the book, she's a class A character. She's very funny, and her guidance is how B kind of comes to grow or blossom. Yeah. So, was there any inspiration for her, or where did she come from? And also, why do you think that Aunt Mary is as wise as she is?
Okay. Aunt Mary. So this book sold on proposal, which means that I had only written 50 pages in an outline. So it sold based on the part that is before B goes to Gray Island. And I was just like, okay, she's gonna go, she's gonna stay with her aunt, great. And then when the book sold and I went back to finish the rest of the draft, I was like, I have no idea who this person is. And in fact, her name used to be Karen, but that was before then, like the name Karen got really charged. I was like, oh, now it's Mary. Okay, so she's Aunt Mary. And really what happened was I just felt like this poor kid, things had been going so badly for her, she just needed a break. And I was like, who should she stay with? Like, who would be the best person for her to stay with? And that's kind of how Aunt Mary came about. And so Aunt Mary she is really wise. She is really funny. She's also really not pushy, which is helpful to be, because there's been this whole scandal at home that no one knows. Everybody feels like they should say something about, but nobody knows what to say. So it's a real relief to her to be with somebody who's like, I'm here when you want to talk about this. I think it's important to talk about things, but I'm not going to push you before you're ready. So really, she was just like who I thought I could give B. But and then she also became like kind of who I needed as I was writing the book too, because a lot of her wisdom has to, for B is really feels like she has to be perfect and she has to do everything right, and she's really hard on herself. And so as I wrote and revised, I realized that like she needed Aunt Mary to help her realize that if she's doing her best, that's enough. And I needed that, I think, too. But I think, and then your question about how did she get so wise, I think she's sort of been through a lot and she's done the work. And in a way, B feels like she's responsible for her parents' happiness, and Aunt Mary is B's mom's much older sister. So when they were kids, I think Aunt Mary felt kind of responsible for B's mom in a totally different way, and her sense of having to like take care of her at all costs didn't really work out that well. And so she's sort of been through that and done the work to figure out what went wrong and how to handle that better. So I think her wisdom comes from having made mistakes, just like we all do, and then reflecting and learning and growing from them.
So one of the things that Aunt Mary does every summer, she takes on like a challenge.
Yeah.
And she's very into self-growth.
She is.
So something she's doing this summer is to do these directed drawings, which B participates in, and kind of like is a time where she's not as much of a perfectionist. She lets herself, kind of go in a way. So did you do those? Did you ever do those with your kids?
Yeah, Cora and I did them together sometimes last year. Do you remember doing those drawings where it gives instructions? And those came in the revision process. I needed something else to happen with B and Aunt Mary for their relationship to bloom, and I needed I just needed B to experience more things outside of softball, because a big part of her storyline is reclaiming her confidence on the softball field, which is, but not in a linear, straightforward way. But another part of her journey is figuring out who she is outside of softball, and that's not all she has to offer. So the art, which was something that she doesn't feel like she's good at, but she can still find joy in, felt like it gave her space to sort of develop in that way.
So speaking of art, let's show the cover.
Oh, yeah.
What do you love about this cover? When you first received it?
Yeah.
How did it make you feel?
I love this cover, and I did from the first time I saw it. I really love that. Well, I love that the O is the ball that she's trying to catch. I love that she looks strong and fierce, which she is, but she also looks a little freaked out and like she's not sure what's gonna happen, which is also true. So I love that it captures like her vulnerability and her strength, which is, I think, is a big part of her. And then I also just really love that she looks like I imagined her, and she looks 13, which sometimes it's hard with illustrated covers. So like there's been a lot of back and forth with some of my book covers about like, does the character look the right age? And this one I felt like, you know, it is an older middle grade novel, and I feel like the cover captures that well. So I just really love it. I love the green. I really, really love the cover. I was really happy when I saw it, and I got to weigh in a little bit on like what color should her uniform be and stuff like that based on what's in the book. And I like the spine a lot, and the interior design is also beautiful.
So what was the scene that was like hard to write, and what was the scene that was fun and joyful to write?
Okay. So probably the hardest thing about this book is just that there are 2 settings and there are 2 whole casts of characters. So that's a lot of characters to manage. And probably the thing that was the hardest for me to figure out how to handle was Bee's best friend from home, whose name is Jessie, because she's not, their friendship is really important, but it's not really at the crux of Bee's story. And but she needs to be sort of enough of a character that you care that there's tension between them. But it was really important to me that they didn't actually have a big falling out at the beginning of the story, that it was more like this awkwardness. When one friend is going through something that the other person doesn't totally understand, there can be this distance and this awkwardness that sometimes causes us to shut down. And so what was really the part that I found hardest was to write the scenes in which Bee and Jessie are kind of having it out and reconnecting when Bee is in Gray Island and Jessie is back in New Jersey, just to make sure that landed, like that mattered enough, because it's at a point in the book where everything is moving towards its conclusion and you want all those scenes to land. So I think that Bee and Jessie scene, where Bee's sitting on the beach at the end, if you read the book, you'll see talking on her cell phone to Jessie. It took me a really long time to get right. And just all of the where and when is Jessie surfacing during Bee's time in Gray Island was tough. And then, to be honest, a lot of this book was fun. This is like my most fun book to write. It was just really a joy for the most part. I loved writing the softball scenes. There's a scene where Bee and this girl Hannah are on the swings, where they're sort of in this competition, but they're also just like these big kids who are doing something that they haven't done since they were younger and swinging themselves really high on the swings and then jumping off, and that felt like a really joyful and fun one.
I like the scene too where they're going through town.
Oh yeah, that's fun too. They have some, there are some good Bee and Hannah scenes.
So how did you mentioned your big cast of characters, like how did you keep track of it when there's like all these softball teams?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for any of the writers out there to manage big cast?
I guess what helped me with this book was to think about sort of tiers of characters. Like there have to be a certain number of people on a softball team. There just do. But they can't, in a book like this at least, where the team dynamic of just one team is not the central thing. There are books that are about a team, and then every character is really important. But for this book, every character on Bee's softball team at home in New Jersey and that she plays softball with at camp in Gray Island cannot be equally important. So I really had to decide who are the key people, and there can only be a few who we're going to really get to know and whose relationships with Bee are really important. And in revisions, you helped me with this, I think, because Cordelia read for me in the process of revision of just like there was one more friend in Gray Island who was really important who had to get minimized to just a kind of background. And then the ones that stayed had to get developed more. And then in terms of developing them, I just think specific is key. And so specific moments that characters have shared in the past, specific things they do, specific kind of verbal tics, things that they always say, anything like that. The more specific, the better. If you only have a short amount of space to introduce a character, you've got to make every mention count. Maybe one more.
One more. So this is like when you are writing, do you hear what people say in your head, or do you like see it in your mind's eye when you're writing a scene, or do you just like what's that process like for you before it gets to the page?
Yeah, I definitely hear it. That I think I would say I saw somewhere, I think it was something that you posted, Laura, that Rob Costello, who's a wonderful writer, said that he writes from his ear and his gut, which I loved. And I think some writers write like most from their gut or their ear or their eyes or their heart or whatever. And I think I write most from my ear and from my heart. I definitely hear dialogue. Like I hear the main character and I hear what other people's dialogue sounds like. I think visual is harder for me, but sometimes I have to sort of do like a little mini sort of like a meditation of just like closing my eyes and like imagining where the character is and all the different, using all the senses, to imagine like the smells and the sounds and everything they'd see and feel. And then once I'm there, I then can sort of feel like I am the character. With this book, it's good that I wrote most of this at home because I definitely did a lot of like acting out the song, figuring out like where she's diving in this and like moving around.
We should definitely have a video of that.
Yeah, probably we should do that. But I think the ear comes most easily, and then I have to sometimes slow down and get myself so that I'm seeing what the character is seeing too.
Cool. Any questions from our audience?
Well, of your 4 books, do you have a favorite, Laurie?
Oh, that's a good question. Do I have a favorite? I think, well, right now, honestly, this feels like my favorite. I think, but I hope that's always sort of the case, that whatever is like just done and coming out feels extra special. But this book really did feel extra special the whole way through, pretty much. I mean, it really did come to me very clearly, and it really, I had a clear vision for it, and I felt like I just wanted to be writing it, and that was great. So right now I'm feeling extra attached to this one, but I love them all for different reasons.
So you had said this book sold on proposal,
Yeah.
and you also mentioned the pre-Karen name.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like, when did you propose
Oh,
this
that's a
book?
great
How
question.
long have you been working on it? And
Yeah.
was there ever any point where there was like a roadblock where you weren't sure where it was going?
Okay, great question. So when did I sell it? Was there a roadblock? So I came up with the proposal for this book in between rounds of edits for St. Ivy in January and February, in early February of 2020. I had the proposal done, ready to go. It was so clear in my head. I was so excited about it. And then obviously, I got my edit letter on St. Ivy, and then everything shut down because of the pandemic. But we had this proposal like ready to go, but we weren't allowed to send it in until St. Ivy went to copy edit. But in that process, so I didn't look at it for several months, and those several months were the early days of the pandemic. So when I went back to it, I did make some small changes to sort of the setup of the book because of the pandemic. So B used to have a lot of anxiety related to something bad happening to her parents, because her parents both lost their first spouse. And so which is part of why she feels like it's her job to make them happy. Like she is the happy thing that came out of a really sad time. And in the early pandemic days, I just felt like this is too charged to have this kid who has this anxiety about something bad happening to her parents. And so and it was really part of the backstory, not the current story. So I just dropped that out. But then it went to my editor, and she brought it quickly, and I had to write it really quickly. This was a fast, I had a few months till it was due. So luckily, the outline really stood. Like the outline for St. Ivy also sold on proposal, and that one, the outline did not work, actually. It turned out when I went to write the actual book. This one, there was a lot that I didn't know. Like I did not know the details of the people that she would be with in Grey Island, but I knew the shape of what would happen in the book, and that stayed the same. So thankfully. This was a smoother process than most books have been for me. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
So two of your four books are centered around sports and the characters play. What is it about sports that creates a setting for the stories that you like to write?
What is it about sports that creates a setting for the stories I like to write? Well, I really like sports. I played sports a lot as a kid, but I also think that there's something that's sort of heightened about sports. Like there's something that's easy to get behind. Like we were just listening the other day, you pulled up the highlights of a Phillies game, and the backup catcher had hit a home run, and like, I didn't even know his name, and I'm like, yeah, all right, there's something very easy to understand about like the stakes of a sports game and the way a team comes together, and the way you're sometimes rooting for the underdog and you're rooting for people to do well under pressure, and it's this group of people sort of working toward a common goal. I think that there's just a lot that feels very compelling and kind of like easy to get into, easy for people to get invested in about sports. And I think there's a lot that this book is a lot about pressure, but even in Up for Air, which is not mostly, this book is the pressure to perform well is at the center of this book. The yips are at the center of this book. But even when it's not, there's something that I find really compelling about what we expect people to do in front of an audience when it comes to sports, and how different it is when you're doing something when people are watching versus when they're not, or when it's like very easy to measure success in sports, so it's easy for everyone to see, ooh, that person didn't do so well, whereas like in a lot of everyday life that's not that obvious. So there's just a lot that feels like, I remember when I was in high school, my drama teacher told us all that theater is like real life with the volume turned up. So we see things we recognize of like emotions we've had, situations we've been in, conversations we've had, relationships we've had, but just to a little bit of an extreme. And for me, sports does that too. And I don't tend to write really enormous books with huge, drama and huge like blockbuster plots, but so this is kind of my kind of drama, like my kind of way to raise the stakes, I think.
I was just wondering if you would share with us what your next project will be.
Oh,
Speaking
sure.
of more sports, right?
More sports, yeah, there's more sports in my next project. Yeah. I have not. Yeah, I will have another book that is not announced yet, but I think it will be in a couple of years, and it, as of now, is called Keeping Pace, and it is about two rival overachievers who used to be best friends and have now been rivals, who team up to train for a half marathon so that they can face off one last time on race day after one beat out the other for 8th grade top scholar. So I'm working on that now.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for being here, and it's been a great question. Thank you.